For generations, the American dream was defined by a single powerful image: a white picket fence, a patch of green grass, and a deed with your name on it. It was the promise that if you worked hard and saved your money, you could own a piece of this country, build equity, and pass something down to your children. But today, that dream is being systematically dismantled, packaged into a financial portfolio, and sold to the highest bidder on Wall Street. The frightening reality is that you are not just competing against other families for a home. You are competing against trillion-dollar hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and algorithms that can buy a house in milliseconds. We are witnessing the greatest transfer of wealth in modern history. A silent coup where the ownership society is being replaced by a rentership society. And it is all happening with the blessing of the United States government. To understand the magnitude of this crisis, we have to look beyond the for sale signs and look at the invisible war being waged in neighborhoods across America. Picture a young couple in Atlanta, Phoenix, or Tampa. They have good jobs, they have saved for a down payment, and they finally find a modest 3-bedroom starter. Home listed for $350,000. They tour the house, fall in love, and immediately offer the full asking price. They feel hopeful, but an hour later, their agent calls with bad news. The seller has accepted another offer. It was an all-cash offer, $20,000 over the asking price, with no inspection required and a closing date of 7 days. The young couple is devastated, assuming they lost out to a wealthier family. But they didn't. They lost to a corporation. They lost to a nameless, faceless entity that will never live in that house, never mow the lawn, and never send kids to the local school. That house has just been absorbed into a rental empire, removed from the housing market forever, and turned into an asset on a balance sheet. This scene is playing out thousands of times a day, every single day, creating a permanent underclass of Americans who are locked out of ownership. This is not an accident of the free market. It is the direct result of government policy and the fallout of the 2008 financial crisis. To truly understand why housing is unaffordable in 2026, we have to go back to the housing crash of 2008. When the bubble burst, millions of Americans lost their homes to foreclosure. Banks were left holding hundreds of thousands of toxic assets houses that were worth half of what was owed on them. The market was in freefall. In a panic, the federal government and the Federal Reserve looked for a floor. They needed someone to buy these houses to stop the bleeding. But instead of bailing out the homeowners and helping them keep their roofs over their heads, they rolled out the red carpet for private equity. The Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHF, piloted programs that allowed massive investment firms to buy foreclosed homes in bulk thousands at a time, steep discounts. It was a fire sale of the American neighborhood. Companies like Blackstone, through its subsidiary Invitation Homes, swept in and bought billions of dollars worth of single-family homes. At the time, they claimed they were saving the market. In reality, they were cornering it. This marked a fundamental shift in the American economy. Before 2010, it was rare for a corporation to own a single-family home. Apartments were for corporations. Houses were for people. Managing scattered houses across a city was seen as a logistical nightmare. But Wall Street did what Wall Street does best. They financialized the problem. They developed sophisticated software and management systems to treat these homes not as individual properties, but as a standardized commodity. They realized that if they owned enough homes in a specific zip code, they could control the market price for rent. If you own 30% of the rental homes in a neighborhood, you don't just participate in the market, you set the market. This was the birth of the institutional landlord. And for the last decade, they have been quietly acquiring more and more inventory, waiting for the perfect moment to squeeze the American tenant. That moment arrived with the COVID-19 pandemic. While millions of Americans were losing their jobs or adjusting to remote work, the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates to near zero. This was intended to stimulate the economy, but it acted as rocket fuel for corporate buyers. With access to virtually free money, these investment firms went on a shopping spree unlike anything the world has ever seen. In 2021 and 2022, investors bought nearly 1 in every 4 homes sold in the United States. In some markets like Jacksonville, Charlotte, and Atlanta, that number jumped to over 30%. They weren't just buying luxury homes. They were specifically targeting starter homes, the affordable entry-level houses that first-time buyers rely on. By snapping up the bottom tier of the market, they cut off the ladder of upward mobility. When you remove the starter home from the equation, you create a bottleneck. People can't buy, so they are forced to rent. And who are they renting from? The very same companies that outbid them for the house. But the situation gets darker when you look at the current policy landscape. Under the guise of fighting inflation, when the Federal Reserve began aggressively raising interest rates to combat inflation, they claimed it would cool the housing market. And in a way, it did, but only for regular people. For the average American family, a mortgage rate of 7% or 8% meant that their monthly payment would double compared to a few years ago. It forced millions of buyers to the sidelines. But here is the twisted irony of American economic policy. High interest rates do not hurt cash buyers. In fact, high rates help them. When regular families retreat because they can't afford a mortgage, the competition disappears. The corporate giants, sitting on billions of dollars in cash accumulated from investors and pension funds, no longer have to bid against the young couple. They can sweep in and buy properties at a discount. The government's attempt to fix the economy actually cleared the playing field. For the predator class, this consolidation of power has created a new form of feudalism. In the Middle Ages, a few lords owned all the land, and the serfs worked the land, paying a portion of their harvest for the privilege of existing. Today, we are moving toward a digital serfdom. The modern lord is a real estate investment trust REIT or a private equity firm. The harvest is 40% to 50% of your monthly income handed over in rent. And unlike the mom-and-pop landlords of the past, who might cut you a break if you lost your job or fix the leak yourself on a Saturday, the corporate landlord is a ruthless automated machine. Tenants in these corporate-owned homes report nightmare scenarios: exorbitant rent, hikes of 20% or 30% upon lease renewal, impossible tourage property managers, and an endless list of junk fees. You want to pay your rent online? There's a fee. You want a pet? There's a fee. You need maintenance? There's a service charge. They have monetized every aspect of living. Furthermore, these corporations are stripping the equity out of American communities. When a family owns a home, the money they pay in mortgage stays in the community. It builds their net worth. When they sell, they use that money to retire or send kids to college. But when a corporation owns the home, the rent money leaves the community instantly. It flows out of the local economy and into the hands of shareholders in New York, London, or Tokyo. It is an extraction economy. We are watching the wealth of the middle class being siphoned off month by month into the coffers of the ultra-wealthy. And the most terrifying part is that this business model relies on the failure of the American dream in their own financial reports. Companies like Invitation Homes and American Homes for Rent list declining homeownership rates as a positive factor for their business. They are literally betting against you. They profit when you cannot afford to buy. Their stock price goes up when your dream dies. The government's response to this crisis has been largely silence, or worse, complicity. While politicians on both sides of the aisle give speeches about the housing crisis, their actions tell a different story. The tax code is riddled with loopholes that benefit these large investors. For example, the way depreciation is calculated allows these firms to pay minimal taxes on their rental income. Additionally, the government-sponsored entities Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which were created to help regular people buy homes, have, at times, backed loans for these rental giants. We have a system where the taxpayer effectively subsidizes the very companies that are pricing them out of the market. Lobbying groups for the real estate industry spend millions of dollars in Washington to ensure that no legislation is passed that would limit the number of homes a corporation can own. There have been attempts bills introduced to ban hedge funds from owning single-family homes, but they die in committee, strangled by the influence of corporate money. And now the strategy is evolving. Because there are no longer enough existing homes to buy, Wall Street has started building them. This is the era of build-to-rent. Entire neighborhoods are now being constructed with no intention of ever selling a single house. You drive past a new development, see brand new 3-bedroom homes with driveways and backyards, and assume families are buying them. But they aren't. The entire subdivision is owned by a single company. It is a horizontal apartment complex. This creates a permanent removal of supply. These houses will never hit the open market. They will never offer a family a chance to build wealth. They are permanent rental units. This shift ensures that the shortage of purchasable homes remains acute, keeping prices high and demand for rentals desperate. It is a closed loop designed to trap the American consumer in a lifetime of payments. The psychological toll of this shift cannot be overstated. Homeownership has always been more than just a financial investment. It is a stake in society. It provides stability. It encourages people to care about their neighborhood, their school board, their local parks. When you turn a nation into transient renters, you erode the social fabric. People who don't know if their lease will be renewed next year don't plant trees. They don't invest in their neighbors. The sense of community dissolves. We are creating a society of drift, where the basic human need for shelter has been transformed into a high-yield asset class for the global elite. We are standing at a precipice. The trajectory we are on leads to a future where homeownership is a luxury reserved for the top 10%. While the rest of the population subscribes to housing like they subscribe to Netflix, the phrase, "you will own nothing and be happy," once a conspiracy theory meme, is rapidly becoming a mathematical certainty for the next generation. The scary truth is that this is not a broken system. It is a system working exactly as it was designed to work for the people who designed it. The consolidation of property is the endgame of unchecked capitalism. Unless there is a massive intervention or radical change in policy that prioritizes families over funds, the American dream will be nothing more than a history lesson. As you look at the skyrocketing prices in your city, and as you wonder why you can't seem to get ahead despite working harder than ever, understand that the deck is stacked. The house always wins, and right now, Wall Street owns the house live. This is not just a housing crisis. It is an existential crisis for the American way of life. The question is, no longer can I afford a home. The question is, will I be allowed to own one? And right now, the answer coming from the powers that be is a resounding silence.